Hi everyone, long time no see. Welcome to something a little bit different for the channel. It is indeed, you are looking at Pokemon. Yes, thrilling I know. Now, for the past few years I know I've not been putting out a lot of videos. I've just been alternating between long Smash Brothers montages and shorter Splatoon highlights. So I figured I'd try and diversify the content just a smidge. And I figured I'd do some Pokemon stuff. Because Pokemon Scarlet has my 4th highest playtime on the Switch right now, I think. And it's probably, strangely, my most played Pokemon game ever. And most of this has been primarily shiny hunting. But this isn't a shiny hunting video. At the time of recording this footage I probably had about 4 or 5 boxes full of shinies, and I thought maybe I should do something with them. So I tried to build a competitive team out of what I had. That's competitive in air quotes, by the way. I don't pretend to be a VGC expert or anything. This is just me trying to climb the in-game rank ladder. And I've been sitting on this footage for about 9 months now. So these are from Ranked Battles Season 13 back in last December 2023. And the goal was just to reach Master Ball rank. I didn't really have any other goal beyond that. And I'll do a more in-depth team breakdown in a little bit, but I think it's better to show than tell. And strangely enough, the first battle I'm showing off here is actually one of the last I recorded. I think it was 4th from the end. And at this point I had a pretty decent grasp on what my team could do, and potential threats such as this Torkoal Lilligant lead, which I saw maybe like 2 or 3 times throughout the season, so I know how dangerous it is. I lead with Rabsca and Gliscor, but I immediately switch out Gliscor to get the weather advantage by going into Tyranitar. And this is in fact a Sandstorm-centric team. The surprise factor here is Rabsca, who I immediately terrestrialize into a rock type, expecting an eruption from Torkoal, even speed by Lilligant's After You. This start caught me off guard the first time I saw it. I got pretty easily swept by After You Lilligant and Eruption Torkoal. But not this time. Torkoal also goes Terra Fire for extra damage, and both Tyranitar and Rabsca resist. And they get an extra special defense boost in the sand, so they tank it pretty well. And Terra Rock isn't just for resistance on Rabsca, since I'm also backing the surprise Weather Ball, which becomes a rock move, boosted by the Terra, and easily takes out this Torkoal, and that's a major threat down immediately. I wish the game would translate these Pokemon names. I cannot read Chinese. I don't think it would be too difficult to implement, since it removes nicknames anyway in ranked battles. Anyway, my opponent sends out Hatterin, and I switch back into Gliscor, expecting a fighting move from Lilligant. It easily eats close combat and gives a little bit of chip damage back from the Rocky Helmet, but that doesn't matter because Rabsca just destroys it with Psychic Noise anyway. I probably should have protected with Rabsca there. I guess they saw Tyranitar as the bigger threat. And Hatterin sets up Trick Room for my opponent's final Pokemon, Ursaluna, which is another rather big threat. Fully expecting Ursaluna to protect this turn to proc its Flame Orb, which it does, and Hatterin goes for Psychic into Rabsca, but I've got the boosted special defense in the sand, and Gliscor just goes for a little bit of chip damage with high horsepower, and I undo the Trick Room with the Rabsca, so now I have the speed control back. Now this turn I decide to protect with Rabsca for some reason. I probably should have gone on the offensive here. I do get a little bit more damage on Hatterin with another high horsepower, but Ursaluna doesn't quite knock out Gliscor with Facade, but Hatterin goes for Dazzling Gleam, and that will be enough to finish it off. It does, however, take itself out in the process because it's holding a Life Orb and gets recoil damage. So that's Hatterin down, and my opponent only has Ursaluna left. So as long as I maintain speed control, it should be fine. I send out Hisui and Goodra, who you won't see for long this battle, as I go for a Breaking Swipe to reduce Ursaluna's attack. But Headlong Rush just demolishes Goodra anyway. Ursaluna is way too powerful, even at -1 attack. I go for a bit of damage with Psychic Noise on Rabsca, which nearly takes it out. You've pretty much got the battle in the bag at this point. The Sandstorm stops. The Sandstorm stops, and I just set it right back up again. But it doesn't matter in the end. And I know I outspeed since this Ursaline is probably negative speed nature for the Trick Room usage, so a low kick from Tyranitar will just be able to take the game. But my opponent forfeits anyway, so that's good games. Onwards to match 2. We're up against Flo, who leads with Landorus and Iron Hands. I think these are the French names, I could be mistaken. I lead with Gliscor and Houndstone, and Landorus gets off Intimidate. I guess that reveals that Gliscor isn't Hypercutter. Once again I switch in Tyranitar to get the Sand up, and this will double Houndstone's speed with Sand Rush. To be honest, the first half of this match was the best Houndstone demonstration I could ask for. Iron Hands goes for Fake Out into the Gliscor slot because it wouldn't be able to do anything to Houndstone. And Houndstone throws out a Will-O-Wisp, burn it, reduce its attack, make it useless for pretty much the rest of the match. Landorus uses Rock Slide, but it misses Tyranitar. That is a recurring theme throughout this battle. The next turn I'm expecting Drain Punch from Iron Hands, so I protect with Tyranitar and I go for the burn on the Landorus as well. I guess you can tell this is quite low on the rank ladder, so I don't think a high level player would leave their physical Landorus in, knowing full well that I can burn it. I guess the Drain Punch correctly, although it could have been any fighting move really. It's just good to know that it has it, because this turn I use Ally Switch with Houndstone to swap positions with Tyranitar, and I avoid what I assume is going to be another Drain Punch. And Landorus misses Rock Slide on both targets. Yikes. I just go for a bit of extra damage on Iron Hands with Low Kick. Tyranitar's in a bit of a bad position now since it doesn't really have anything incredibly useful to deal with these two, and Ally Switch may fail if used 2 turns in a row. So I switch back into Gliscor, and I use Howl with Houndstone to give them both a +1 in attack, although Houndstone would be at neutral since it took Intimidate turn 1. And Houndstone's final move is Phantom Force, combined with a Power Herb to let it attack immediately. I just go for a bit of extra damage on Landorus. This is yet another Rock Slide on Houndstone. I use Swords Dance on Gliscor, so that's a +3 and can knock out pretty much anything on their team. Iron Hands goes for Thunder Punch into my ground type, since apparently using Ally Switch once is enough to make them overpredict themselves. It's a bit of a gimmicky move, I know a lot of players really don't like Ally Switch. Since Sandstorm ended last turn, I switch out Houndstone to Tyranitar to get it back. I'm assuming this Landorus is Choice Scarf at this point since it seems to be locked into Rock Slide, but at least it landed this time. And I finally take out the Iron Hands with a bit of overkill, +3 high horsepower, although all those attack boosts are mostly for this Pokemon. Here's Rapid Strike Urshifu, which you might think is a bit of a problem since I've got a Rock and Ground type on the field, but I activate a defensive Water Terror type on Gliscor, which is very specifically for Urshifu Rapid Strike. Oh, and the Landorus isn't scarfed, it was just spamming the A button for the last 6 turns. And now we sit back and watch the magic as Surging Strikes hits 3 times, and each one activates Gliscor's Rocky Helmet, chunking half of Urshifu's health in a single turn. Now a light sneeze would knock it out, but I just finish it off with another high horsepower. And Landorus protects against the knockoff, it's holding on for dear life. It's still taking burn damage though, so that's good. My opponent's last Pokemon is Tornadus, it's the fastest thing on the field, it hits both my Pokemon with Bleakwind Storm, and Gliscor barely holds on, and Landorus misses one more Rock Slide for good measure, although that might have also had something to do with Gliscor's ability. Water Terror type also boosts Gliscor's Crab Hammer, which I only recently got in this generation, so I figured I'd use it. It's a nice little bit of water coverage, and with all the attack boosts it's plenty powerful to knock out Tornadus. And Tyranitar cleans up the Landorus and the game. GG's. Now on to match 3, and to reveal the last member of the team, as well as show a bit more of Goodra since it didn't really get much screen time in the first match. This is a battle against Mansa, and it's also the longest battle in the video, so buckle in. They're also using a pretty unconventional team full of shinies, which does make this battle a bit more interesting in my opinion. Mousecrane leads and intimidates Goodra, but Tyranitar's holding Clear Amulet so it's unaffected. Now here's where I learn a valuable lesson. In a battle where they also have a weather setter, it's best not to lead with your own weather setter, as Politoed immediately comes in, sets up the rain and lets Swift Swim Golduck get an extremely fast and powerful Hydro Pump on Tyranitar with a critical hit to boot. Although to be honest, unless it's in sand, Tyranitar's special defense isn't great, so I doubt the crit mattered there. I just go for Breaking Swipe with Goodra. I know none of the Pokemon so far are physical attackers, but this was just to break any potential sashes. The final member of my team is a Galarian Weezing, and I'm running Levitate on it instead of the more common neutralizing gas. Neutralizing gas just wouldn't be useful on this team. I switch out Goodra into Rabsca to try and get some potential speed control with Trick Room, as my opponent terrestrializes their Golduck into a ground type. I just protect Weezing to scout what my opponent wants to do, as Golduck uses a ground type Terra Blast, which I definitely predicted, and I went into a bug type, yeah, totally. Politoed goes for Muddy Water, which luckily misses Rabsca. That miss absolutely mattered later down the line. This was an extremely lucky battle for me. My opponent missed so many crucial attacks. Now I terrestrialize Weezing into an electric type, which now it has no weaknesses since it has Levitate. But it's not necessarily just a defensive type like Water Gliscor since it's packing Thunderbolt. Golduck misses Hydro Pump, and Politoed misses Weezing with Muddy Water, but it hits Rabsca. If it had hit the last Muddy Water, this battle would probably have been over already. My Weezing uses Terra Boost to Thunderbolt, which only does about half to Politoed, and thankfully Rabsca managed to get up Trick Room. And hey, guess what? It's Rabsca's Niche Weather Ball coming in handy, as it's a Water type move now. Boosted by the rain, it takes out Ground type Golduck. This was so situational, but I definitely chuckled a bit at the time. Second Thunderbolt from Weezing just barely isn't enough to take out Politoed. And Politoed misses yet another Muddy Water on Rabsca. Just hanging on for dear life at this point. My opponent reveals their fourth Pokemon is Ambipom, so there's certainly a fake out coming here. I just go for Protect on both my Pokemon. I don't really want them getting any free damage. And here's something interesting. I looked up this opponent after the battle, Mansa. Since I was curious about the whole shiny team thing, I wondered if they were doing something similar to me. And it turns out they were streaming at the time. So after that double protect, they call me a bitch. So thanks for that. I'm not mad about it. I like seeing the battle from someone else's perspective. See what I could have done differently. See their reaction to all their attacks missing. I switch Ambipom back into Masquerain. Intimidate doesn't really do anything to these two. I try to get a Psychic Noise off on the Politoed to finish it off, but it protects, and I just go for a spread Sludge Wave with Weezing, which is blocked by Rabsca's Telepathy. This team originally did have more synergy, as I had Earthquake on Gliscor, which wouldn't hit Weezing or Rabsca because of their abilities, but I ended up changing it because I was really struggling against Rillaboom and its grassy terrain. Politoed gets the double protect, but it doesn't matter since I can just go for damage on the Masquerain instead. And unfortunately Weezing doesn't have the strongest hits, even if they're Terra boosted, because it's just not enough to knock out Masquerain even. And unfortunately my Trick Room wore off, so now they have the speed advantage again. I switch Rabsca back into Goodra, and protect with Weezing, just an overall safe play. The Masquerain uses Struggle Bug to lower my special attack, which is fine because my Goodra is actually all physical attacks, and is running mostly spot moves anyway. A second wave of Struggle Bug and Muddy Water will be enough to take out Weezing. Unfortunately it did quite a bit of damage to the Politoed, but overall really didn't do much in this battle. It's probably not the best showcase for it, but it may redeem itself later. I try to save it by giving a little bit of help with Life Dew with Goodra, but Goodra just heals itself back to full, which is still fine obviously. And it may have actually affected the outcome of the battle, letting that little sliver of health back. Now I need to get Rabsca some health back so it can set up a Trick Room again, so I just protect with it so Goodra can use Life Dew once more. Masquerain just keeps going for Struggle Bug. I think at this point Mansa still believes it's a special attacking set. Though I did use Breaking Swipe at the start, so I don't know. And Politoed misses yet another Muddy Water, this time on Goodra. It's kind of ironic that a move used for lowering accuracy keeps missing. Masquerain goes for Hurricane on Rabsca, which misses again, but it's 7% accurate move, so it's a bit deserved this time I think. Goodra's packing Ice Spinner, also specifically for Rillaboom, but that'll be enough to take out Masquerain, and I managed to get up a crucial Trick Room with Rabsca, so now we have speed control again, and I hope everyone appreciates me speeding up all this residual in between turns, all the healing and the Sandstorm damage, etc. This turn Fake Out was definitely coming from Ambipom again, and Goodra's not packing Protect, so it's a bit of a sitting duck, so I protect with Rabsca anyway, which might have been a silly play. I need to start chunking this Politoed again, which turns out is packing Earth Power, which they only just revealed now, despite the fact that I've had a Steel type out in the field for the past 4 turns. I get Psychic Noise off on Politoed to stop Leftovers healing, which has taken it back to about 2/3 of its health, since I've not been targeting it at all these past few turns. I think it was at 4 HP at one point. I use Breaking Swipe Goodra, which Politoed barely hangs on again, but it's mostly for the Amp Bomb, which I need to keep it in check for when the Trick Room wears off. Triple Axle will probably knock me out next turn, unless I drop its attack again. So I go for another Breaking Swipe, which takes out the Politoed in the process. Finally, it's been there since turn 1. And thanks to the attack drop, Triple Axle just barely doesn't KO. With a bit of Leftovers recovery and 1 turn of Trick Room left, I feel like I'm safe to Life Chew, taking me out of the range of another Triple Axle. These last few turns are a bit more stally than I usually like to play, but it's my win condition at this point, so I'm fine with it. Now this next turn I believe would be a roll whether or not Triple Axle will take me out. Trick Room wore off, so Amphiform will move first, but it doesn't matter since Triple Axle misses, and I get another Life Chew off, which takes us back to half health. Now, the craziest part about this is that watching Mance's footage, the Amphiform was actually running wide lens, so it only had a 1% chance of missing. That might have been the unluckiest battle for them, but for me, what can I say, it was all skill. Amphiform doesn't have the attack power to break Goodra. No, it probably would have taken me out, but it didn't happen, and Goodra manages to hang in there and win the battle practically solo at the end. Good games, if a little bit hacksy. It would appear that I've got a little bit of plot armor going on. Well, now that those initial battles are out of the way and my whole team has been revealed, let me briefly go into some details about their movesets and stats and stuff. The first shiny I caught for this team was Rabsca, which is fully invested in HP and special attack with a little bit in defense. It doesn't have 0 speed IVs, which would of course be ideal in Trick Room, but it was a random encounter, so it can't really be out. Originally I had Bug Buzz over Psychic Noise, but I changed that when the TM came out in the Indigo Disc. And I've been switching between Covert Cloak and Mental Herb for the item. Covert Cloak is for blocking Fake Out, and Mental Herb is for blocking Taunt, and both can be quite problematic for Trick Room setters. I think I'd probably stick with Mental Herb in the end. The next Pokemon is Tyranitar. Not much to say about this mon. 2 strong stab moves, knock off, good secondary effect, and Rock Slide just being an excellent spread move in doubles. Low Kick is for other strong dark types like King Gambit, which resist both stab moves, and Roaring Moon, Dust Lunar, etc. Clear Amulet is for all the Intimidate users running around in doubles. I was quite tempted to run Terra Blast Flying for damaging grass types and maybe change it to an Assault Vest for that extra bulk in the sand. I went Terra Flying over Ghost because, as I mentioned previously, I was running Earthquake on Gliscor for a time. Houndstone next, probably my favourite Pokemon from Gen 9, and I love the synergy between this and Tyranitar, mostly because of Ally Switch. I know it's a gimmicky move. I was originally running Protect, but I saw that Ally Switch had limited distribution this generation, plus with the type synergy with Tyranitar I felt like I had to use it. I gave it some specific attack EVs to take out a particularly offensive variant of Fluttermane, but to be honest I can't really remember what that variant was. It's mostly a fast utility mon instead of an attacker though, so maybe its attack stat doesn't matter all that much. Now we have Gliscor, which I probably changed its moveset the most during testing. It's fully invested in HP and defense with Water Terra type, which completely flips its weaknesses. This was of course along with Rocky Helmet for Urshifu specifically, plus it's got a newly acquired Crab Hammer for this generation. Swords Dance was a last minute addition since it was generally quite passive beforehand, and I just really needed a good flying type stab, so I went Aerial Ace even though it's not the most powerful flying move ever. Now Weezing, which I specifically bred for with the Masuda method so I could get 0 speed IVs, unlike Rabsca, with safety goggles for the Sandstorm and Spore immunity. Originally I had Clear Smog for Atsugiri and Dondozo, but they were relatively uncommon during my ranked run, and I was struggling with Rillaboom more, so I changed it to a more powerful poison move in Sludge Wave, and it doesn't really matter if it hits allies since they're all either immune or resistant to poison type moves. It's also a mixed attacker since I had very few special moves on the team, but I also wanted it to benefit from Houndstone's Howl, so I added Play Rough. And finally is Goodra, which actually replaced a previous Pokemon I was using in testing. That was a Sandvale Wug Trio, That was a bit of a silly Pokemon that honestly kind of dragged the whole team down. And I've mentioned a couple of times, but the team was struggling with Rillaboom. So this Goodra was my answer to that with Sap Sipper and Ice Spinner. Plus it has an excellent defensive profile with a Sandstorm immunity, and it gives some good general team support with Life Dew and Breaking Swipe. Although it does kind of struggle with putting any offensive pressure on the opponent, so perhaps I should have given it something like Curse, although I'm not really sure what move I would replace with that. And here are a few examples of other things that I tried in open matches during testing. Some things I tried were Psychic Fangs on Gliscor to break any potential screens, but I didn't see too many Grimmsnarl or Alolan Ninetales or the like, and I feel like I can play around screens anyway. Now I originally had Speed Swap on Rabsca, but Trick Room is overall much better for speed control. Speed Swap is insanely gimmicky and hardly worked. However, in a funny twist, in the first match I did in testing, my opponent actually used a Speed Swap Rabsca against me. I'm not sure what the odds are of that when it by itself is an incredibly niche move that very few Pokemon have access to. You'll also notice that I'm not using Rabsca's usual purpose of Revival Blessing. As much as I like the idea of having 4.5 Pokemon in a battle, I just couldn't fit it on the moveset. Gliscor's original moveset was Crabhammer, Earthquake, Psychic Fangs and Feint, but to be honest, at the skill level I was at, I didn't feel like I could use Feint effectively. During testing I only managed to get something off of it one time, so I scrapped it for Crabhammer, High Horsepower, Aerial Ace, Flying Stab and Swords Dance. And that's it. I might put a rental team code in the description later once I've finalised a few things like Rabsca's item. But for now, let's move on to some more battles after I've rested my voice. It's been quite a while since I've recorded commentary. My throat is shot to pieces. So I'll see you in a moment. Alright, I'm back. It's like I never left or anything. Our next battle is up against Dawn, and as a bit of an early warning, I feel like I make a few misplays in this match. I'll point them out as we go along, but keep in mind at this stage I didn't have much battle experience, so you can kind of forgive any amateurish mistakes. And right away, despite having the type advantage and access to Ally Switch, I go for a very passive play by protecting Tyranitar and going for an immediate Phantom Force on the Annihilate. It uses Final Gambit, which I was predicting, to be fair, or at least another fighting type move, but Ally Switch would have had the same effect and I would have been able to knock off the Oranguru. Instead, it manages to get up a Trick Room. Now this turn I do what I should have done on the first turn, only the Oranguru protects itself, so knockoff is wasted. The Annihilate is probably locked in with Scarf, Final Gambit, and the Sandstorm's making it less and less effective. So I switch out into Goodra to take whatever minuscule damage this Annihilate wants to do, as well as save Tyranitar for later. And Oranguru gets a bit of chip on Houndstone. Psychic, there's the smallest Final Gambit you'll ever see. I just go for Howl on Houndstone to make Goodra. There's a Pokemon in the back that Goodra should be able to handle quite well, so I give it an attack boost. And it just so happens to be coming out right now. It is the Sylveon. So I figured I'd be able to chunk it with Iron Head. However, it terastallizes into the perfect defensive counter type in Fire. So Iron Head now does next to nothing, unfortunately. The Sylveon goes for Hyper Voice, which also activates Throat Spray, and if you know what Oranguru does best, you'll understand that the situation is very bad. It instructs Sylveon to act again, using this time a boosted Hyper Voice to finish up Houndstone and nearly finish Goodra with a crit. Sylveon's ability, Pixelate, is making Hyper Voice a fairy type move and giving it stab, so I can't swap in Tyranitar, and I don't even think there's a special defense boosted in the sand to save it, so I have no choice but to switch into Gliscor. Now this is one of the big misplays. I do something stupid here and terastallize Gliscor. I guess in a moment of panic I thought that because it was Terra Fire, Hyper Voice would be a fire type move and I'd resist it. But no, that's not how Pixelate works, I'm just an idiot. However, Gliscor gets a lucky dodge on the first Hyper Voice with Sand Veil, and it barely hangs on from the second hit to take out Sylveon with Crabhammer, although I think High Horsepower would have sufficed, and I didn't need to terastallize at all. And just as the Sandstorm wears off, I bring Tyranitar back in to set it up again, and my opponent's last Pokemon is Toxtricity. which would now be super effective against my Water-type Gliscor. However, because it's a Trick Room team, it's probably not speed invested. So Gliscor outspeeds, takes out with quite effective high horsepower. Tyranitar cleans up the Oranguru with knockoff. I'm guessing it was probably a Boom Burst or Overdrive Toxicity for use with Instruct. It's a good strategy, but my opponent clearly underestimated the power of Sand Veil Plot Armor. Because why wouldn't they? It's very situational. Anyway, good games. On to the next battle against Ronnie. Now the main problem in this match is my opponent's Weezing and its neutralizing gas, which renders my usual Sandstorm strategies unusable. So first turn I make a ballsy play by not switching around Houndstone and predicting my opponent to not target it with Shadow Ball, which would have destroyed it. Instead, the Flutter Mane goes for Spread Dazzling Gleam, and it's one of the few Flutter Mane that didn't terrestrialize turn 1, luckily. So Houndstone takes out immediately with a super effective Phantom Force. Weezing puts the burn on Houndstone, but I'm unlikely to use Phantom Force again in this battle, so it's fine. And Houndstone's main purpose was to take out the Flutter Mane in this match. My opponent sends in Roaring Moon. I expect a knockoff on something, so I ally switch Tyranitar to the Houndstone slot, but it just sets up a Tailwind. Both of my Pokemon resist Weezing Sludge Bomb, but I do need to be careful if it poisons, and Tyranitar just one-shots Roaring Moon with a low kick, which I was kind of surprised about. I thought Roaring Moon was maybe a bit bulkier. Speaking of bulk, my opponent's next Pokemon is Iron Hands, which I immediately switched Tyranitar out into my own Weezing, predicting a Drain Punch, but my opponent was actually well prepared and packing the Heavy Slam, perhaps predicting the ally switch again or some Terra-type shenanigans. Weezing is doubled down and takes a lot of damage, but barely holds on, and Houndstone gets a crucial Will-O-Wisp on the Iron Hands to cripple it for the rest of the match. However, nothing will save either of my two Pokemon. Since their Tailwind's up, they both outspeed and pick up the double KO on my Weezing and Houndstone. I just decide to let them go and get a free switch into Tyranitar and Rabsca. Iron Hands is still quite a big threat even though it's burnt. Any fighting type move would still be quite effective on Tyranitar, and if it has Drain Punch, you'll be able to keep it perpetually healthy. It also terrestrializes into the water type, so now I have nothing super effective to use against it. I just protect against the now revealed Drain Punch. Rabsca takes a Sludge Bomb which poisons it. Clearly this was a match where I was running Mental Herb over Covert Cloak. I do manage to get speed control with Trick Room, and next turn Rabsca will go first and hit Iron Hands with Psychic Noise, not just for chip damage, but to prevent it from using Drain Punch. I also terrestrialize Rabsca so it can eat another Sludge Bomb. Maybe I should have done that the turn earlier, but the Heavy Slam got me a bit rattled, I think. And I'm just slowly whittling down the Iron Hands with neutral damage, but Weezing takes a massive amount from Psychic Noise, and Tyranitar can finish off Iron Hands with knockoff, revealing that it was Assault Vest. Weezing, if it's packing Sludge Bomb, can do absolutely nothing to these two rock types on the field. Strangely, I thought that the Weezing would be running Black Sludge, but no message came up on screen to show that their healing had been blocked, so I don't know what set they were running. And as a funny interaction, the neutralizing gas disappears, and the Sandstorm gets set up again, even though the match is already over. This is a well-programmed game, don't you know? But good games to that opponent. That might have been my best use of Psychic Noise in any of the battles in this video. Our next opponent is a Starry-Eyed Guy. Maybe they meant Starry-Eyed. Either that or they're across the other side of the stadium. It's like, oh! Anyway, they lead with Golden Go and Grimmsnarl. Golden Go can be a bit troublesome, especially since I didn't bring Goodra to this match for some reason, which is my only Steel Resist outside of Terra. Grimmsnarl immediately sets up Reflect. I just want to get some damage on this Golden Go, so I double it with Phantom Force and Knockoff. Turns out they're packing Eject Back, so the special attack drop from Make It Rain gets them out for free. I really like this Eject Back tech, and I may have to steal it for a certain set sometime in the future. The Great Tusk takes a little bit of damage from Knockoff, but I do remove its Assault Vest, so that tells me a bit more about the set that's running. This turn I just go for a burn on Great Tusk, and expecting a fighting type move, just protect Tyranitar. He actually goes for Earthquake. Tyranitar blocks it, and with the burn it's not quite enough to knock out Houndstone. But it turns out the Grimmsnarl is running the fighting move, and it has Drain Punch for some reason. I'm glad I unintentionally scouted that, and knowing that I just switch in Weezing to replace Tyranitar, as it quad resists fighting and is immune to Earthquake. And I also gave it an attack boost with Howl. And Play Rough is Weezing's only physical move that it knows, but it hits 3 of the opponent's team super effectively, so it's fine to go with that boost, especially if they've got a Reflect up. Houndstone goes down to another Earthquake, and the Grimmsnarl does like 0 damage. I was sending Gliscor to replace, but I definitely have a lucky escape here, as I don't Terastallize it right away, instead going straight for a greedy Sword stance. I've forgotten that most Great Tusk, especially one that was holding an Assault Vest, would probably be running Ice Spinner, but luckily it just decides to knock off my Weezing because it not taking Sandstorm damage was clearly a big problem for them, I guess. Weezing then takes out Grimmsnarl with a Play Rough, although I feel like it shouldn't have KO'd through Reflect, even +1, I don't know. Grimmsnarl's that bulky. Now the next turn I Terastallize, but mostly to resist the Make It Rain from Golden Go. I also get some nice damage off the Great Tusk with Terra Boosted Crab Hammer, but it doesn't KO behind Reflect. Instead, Great Tusk actually does have Ice Spinner, and now chooses to target Gliscor, who resists, and they knock themselves out on my Rocky Helmet. And there's the Make It Rain, which is now resisted. The last Pokemon is a Galarian Moltres. As they go and Terastallize their Golden Go into an Electric type for some reason, but I just high horsepower it, so I'm not quite sure what they were planning there. It's a massive wasted terror. The Moltres starts setting up with Agility, and I just go for Thunderbolt as opposed to Play Rough. That's simply because a Galarian Moltres that I fought in a previous battle was running Terra Poison, and they managed to walk all over me using that, so I thought it was a more safe play. Start chunking it with Crab Hammer, but thanks to the Reflect it doesn't KO, gives it a special attack boost, activates Citrus Berry, and now Weezing knocks it back below half and gives it a second Berserk special attack boost. I thought my Gliscor would be in danger of not being knocked out here, so I switch out, but it doesn't really matter, I shouldn't have been so worried. Weezing and Tyranitar both resist Fiery Wrath, and then even at +2 it does very little damage to both of them. Weezing can then finish it off with the final Play Rough. And that's that. Good games to the guy who stares, I guess. Our next match is against Adri or Adri. I apologise if neither of those are right. This is another pretty long match. It's reminiscent of Gen 5, as most of the matches contesting the advantageous weather. My opponent's using a partial Sun team with Drought Torkoal as lead to activate Photosynthesis on Fluttermane. So I don't lead with Tyranitar, and I just switch it in turn 1 to turn the Sunlight off, give us the sand advantage, and the Fluttermane loses its speed boost. Although it doesn't really matter, my team's slow, it's the fastest thing in the battle still. Fluttermane just goes for Protect, which blocks Iron Head, and the Torkoal goes for Heat Wave, which misses Goodra and does a smidgen of damage to Tyranitar with the special defense boost from the sand. On the next turn the Torkoal switches out, just so it can come back in later and reset the sun, and my opponent brings in Sinistcha, which restores Fluttermane back to full. As for Dazzling Gleam, that does very little damage to these two special attack sponges. Knockoff from Tyranitar brings Fluttermane down to its sash, and I predicted the Torkoal switch out and Ice Spinner into the right slot, catching Sinistcha. However, it only does about a third since Goodra's not attack invested. The Focus Sash didn't matter on Fluttermane since Sandstorm damage knocks it out in the end. And my opponent reveals their last Pokemon as Iron Moth, or Ferropolita, which I think is probably its Spanish name. It gives itself a speed boost with Booster Energy. And now Sinistcha can switch straight back out again into Torkoal, giving them the sun back, and probably boosting whatever fire move is coming from the Iron Moth. I switch Tyranitar out, expecting this, planning to sack off Rabsca and just bring Tyranitar straight back in at the end of the turn to get the sand. My opponent Terastallizes their Iron Moth into the Water type, which isn't great for this team's coverage, and it does go for Heat Wave. Rabsca somehow survives on 2 HP, and it gets some of that back from Goodra's Life Dew. Rabsca's not really useful in this battle, and I only really need to use it for pivoting in and out Tyranitar. Which, hey, guess what? I do that now. The Tyranitar comes back in, and the weather is ours once again, but probably not for long as they switch their Torkoal back out. It's a revolving door of Pokemon. Sinistcha comes back in, Iron Moth gets off another Heat Wave, which doesn't do much to Tyranitar, and I restore it straight back up again with Life Dew. This could go on for a while, and there's not much either of us could do about it. If this Sinistcha is packing Life Dew too, it could be a very to be a very stally endgame. Instead of getting the sun back up this turn, my opponent simply goes for Heatwave again, and they choose to use Sinister's signature move, Gotcha, perhaps trying to get a burn on Tyranitar, but they just end up giving Goodra an attack boost with Sap Sipper. I need to try and get some neutral damage on the Iron Moth, but I kind of mess up by using Knockoff, forgetting that Iron Moth burned its booster energy earlier, isn't holding an item anymore, so maybe Rock Slide would have been the better play here. Once again, speeding through all this residual damage, which is definitely an issue with this team, with the constant Sandstorm and Goodra's leftover recovery. My opponent brings back in Torkoal to reset the sun, and I probably expected this as once again Tyranitar out, trying to sack off Rabsca. Sorry, it's not going down this turn because the Iron Moth has Morning Sun and restores its HP all the way back up to full. I just go for Breaking Swipe for a bit of damage, even though it lowers attack, and they have 3 special attackers, well 4 if you include the Fire Main at the start. Goodra really is ill-equipped to fight water types, and fire types for that matter. I bring my Tyranitar back in, but they take their Torkoal out, so they've got switch initiative for this turn. I think that's the right phrase. Sinister's ability brings Iron Moth back up, and Breaking Swipe from Goodra does roughly the same amount of damage to keep it balanced. This does, however, activate Sinister's Citrus Berry, so it's going to stay around a bit longer with some additional health. It's getting very stally again. I think I'm getting a bit impatient at this point. I'm sick of all the switching around, so as they switch their Sinister out to Torkoal one more time, I just decide to go on the offensive. Their Iron Moth gets all their health back in Morning Sun, and I use Rock Slide, which unfortunately misses the Iron Moth, but gets some crucial damage on the Torkoal, coupled with another Breaking Swipe. It's nearly enough to knock it out, but it lingers on as its defense is just way too high apparently. Now it's time to really sack off Rabsca, so I swap it back in, but they withdraw their Torkoal too. I do still have the 4-3 Pokemon advantage at this point, so it should always be possible for me to get Weather in the end. It's just knowing how many more turns that will be. Iron Moth gets Heatwave off again and finally knocks out Rabsca. I like to imagine the scenario where it missed and Rabsca somehow survives the whole battle in the face of 2 fire types, but alas, it does not happen. I spin her into the Torkoal slot, not necessarily predicting the switch this time, but at Torkoal's low health it wouldn't matter if they switched or not, and I get a nice chunk of damage on the Sinister. Pokemon I have in the back is Gliscor, so I swap Tyranitar in to get the sand up, and possibly dodge something with Sand Veil. I do Terrastallize Gliscor to water to resist more heat waves, but looking back at the battle, maybe I should have done that with Goodra earlier, since I don't think there's much my opponent could have done to a water-type Goodra with Sap Sipper. Iron Moth goes for another heat wave, but it's not the Sand Veil Pokemon that dodges, it's Tyranitar, bizarrely. I tried to predict the Torkoal switch with Crab Hammer, but Sinister just protects against it instead. Actually, I think anything from Gliscor could have taken out Sinister or Torkoal, regardless of who was in. My opponent brings out Torkoal one last time for a powered up heat wave, but it just can't break through these 2 resistances. And a combination of a critical hit, high horsepower from Gliscor and Rock Slide from Tyranitar will wipe their side of the field. And the weather advantage no longer matters, as the last Pokemon is a very low HP Sinister in the back, which would get knocked down by anything I have. There's no point in switching, so Gliscor can take it out with an Aerial Ace. My other 2 moves have imperfect accuracy, so I'm glad I'm packing a move that never misses, since I wouldn't want to miss a crucial move at the end. And they get a double KO with Gotcha or some scenario like that. GG's, well played, but the sand manages to blot out the sun. On to another match. This one's against Micah, who leads with a very scary Pokemon, Drago. Now, I never played much of Sword and Shield, but I've seen what this thing can do. Even though it's my first time fighting one in Scarlet and Violet, its reputation precedes it. I know it hits with a powerful spread move called Dragon Energy, which is just like Torkoal's Eruption, where it's stronger at full HP. They also Terrastallize it with a Dragon type for extra damage, because 150 base power just isn't enough. And the only way I can think of surviving this is to boost Rabsca and Tyranitar's special defense with Terror Rock and Sandstorm. The Tornado sets up Tailwind, which I don't think really matters since all my team's quite slow anyway. And here comes the big hit. At max HP and 1.5 special defense, Rabsca lives on a sliver and can set up a Trick Room, so now their Tailwind is nullified. We're definitely not in the clear, obviously. It's strange looking back, but I don't think I actually brought Weezing to this match, which would have been the perfect answer to it, you know, being immune to dragon moves. Now I can deal some solid damage with a Rock Weather Ball and a Rock Slide from Tyranitar. I assume the Drago was choice specs for some reason. They turn around and single target Tyranitar with the Dragon Pulse. So it's good to know that if it was in fact specs, Rabsca would have died on the spot and they probably would have swept my whole team. And Tornadus luckily gets flinched by Rock Slide. So the next turn I fumble a bit since I knew the Sandstorm damage would finish up Tornadus. I didn't target it at all. So the Drago protects against Rabsca's attack, and I perhaps greedily set up a Sword Stance in front of Tornadus that has Icy Wind. It's quite effective against Gliscor, but it doesn't knock it out since it has quite low base power, and I guess Gliscor is slightly bulkier on the special side than I thought. Either way, it drops Gliscor's speed, which is better in Trick Room, I suppose, and the Sandstorm takes out Tornadus. The switch in is Urshifu, which goes for Aqua Jet, but I get another Lucky Sand Veil dodge, and Rabsca immediately takes it out with Psychic Noise, whilst Gliscor can finish up the Drago. It's funny that all Urshifu opponents I've shown this far in the video have been taken out pretty efficiently, but in reality it is a pretty tricky matchup for the team. I'm just not showing all my losses. The Tailwind wears off as the last Pokemon is a pretty uncommon Pokemon, Ramblegast. It would have gotten an attack buff from the Tailwind, but it came in slightly too late, and now Shadow Sneak isn't enough to finish off Gliscor. Although even if it had, I had Rabsca plus another Pokemon in the back, so it was checkmate already. Good games, and that's actually the last battle with Rabsca in this video. Quite a resilient little thing, considering bug types are usually unimpressive. I'm a big advocate for unorthodox bug types. Hopefully I'll be able to use more in future videos. Godspeed, Rabsca. Before we get to the end, here are a few one-off highlights where the full matches aren't particularly interesting. And we all know how problematic Golden Go is, first of all. I feel like Tyranitar might have survived this Make It Rain with the Sandstorm defense boost. But Golden Go crits both my Pokemon turn 1. I'm not sure what the EV spread was, but I reckon the crit might have mattered. And we definitely lost this match, like, immediately. Now, one of my smaller goals that I wanted to pull off with this team was to take an Urshifu's Surging Strikes with the Gliscor, do half HP and Rocky Helmet damage, and then ally switch into Surging Strikes again, and have Urshifu practically knock itself out from recoil. Unfortunately, I didn't get that scenario, but in this match, here's Goodra dancing around Rillaboom with Sap Sipper, where I get 2 attack boosts by ally switching Goodra into Woodhammer. Of course, Goodra has no attack investments, so even a +2 Ice Spinner does only about 2/3 to Tornadus, and does knock it out. It's a pretty funny interaction nonetheless. Now here's an odd clip that I might actually need some clarification on, and it revolves around Sinistra and a particular move that it knows. So we've come down to a 1v1 situation, and I start setting up Sword Stance since I don't think a single Aerial Ace would knock out Sinistra, but it counteracts that with Strength Sap. Now on screen I'm going to put what I think my attack boosts are at, because there's some weird interactions here that might have had something to do with how I know damage rolls, or maybe it's something to do with how Strength Sap works. I'm not 100%. Either way, at Aerial Ace's current strength, Sinistra barely survives on maybe like 3 or 4 HP, but its Strength Saps lowers my attack and restores to full, so I set up another Sword Stance, obviously. Now I should be at 4 stages here, so the next turn I Aerial Ace again, but it does nearly the exact same amount as it did at 3 stages. And then Sinistra restores to full again, and after that I set up yet another Sword Stance, so I'm at a lofty +5 I think, luckily not getting burnt by much gacha. And then here's the plot twist, I Aerial Ace again, and it lives, this time because it's got a bloody Focus Sash all this time. Of course, it didn't Strength Sap last turn, so I managed to win this exchange. However, it was just the strangest interaction. If anyone has any insight on this interaction, or Strength Sap in general, leave a comment down below. I can only theorise about the damage rolls, but I don't know if Strength Sap works the way I think it does. Just some factual information would be appreciated. And here's the final stretch. I'll show the last 2 battles before reaching Master Ball rank. This penultimate battle is a weird one. So I immediately see a Psy Spam team, probably Expanding Force, which won't work on Tyranitar, or Heat Wave, which isn't effective. So I'm expecting a switch out here, probably from the Armourouge spot, while the Indeedee uses Follow Me or something. No, they switch Indeedee out into Gyarados to get an Intimidate off, I suppose. But Tyranitar has Clear Amulet. Now the Armourouge goes for Wide Guard, which makes sense if they were expecting a Rock Slide, but against two Psychic types, why would I not go for a Dark type move? And I annihilate the Armourouge with a +1 knockoff. And they bring back Indeedee, so I thought about going for knockoff again, but it already created Psychic Seed, so it won't do as much, so I just go for Rock Slide, mostly for the Gyarados, and try to burn it so it won't hurt Tyranitar as much, and they forfeit. Awesome. In a way, I'm kind of glad that wasn't the last battle of the video, but it's still mighty disappointing. Just because you got the turn 1 prediction wrong doesn't mean the battle's over. Now, after that underwhelming victory, I'm just hoping the last battle is something decent. And it's a match against Huizo. One of their first Pokemon is a familiar face Oranguru, as well as an annoying pest next to it, known as Mousehold. They definitely get a free Trick Room up this turn as Mousehold goes Follow Me to draw single target moves towards it. Perhaps I should have gone for Rock Slide, try to get a lucky flinch. Instead I prioritise boosting Tyranitar's attack with Howl, and just go for the Oranguru with knockoff, just in case the Mousehold didn't want to boost Follow Me or something, but it did. Tyranitar doesn't do quite as much damage as I thought it would to Mousehold. Maybe it's tankier than I realised, you know, for a family of mice anyway. And they do indeed get a Trick Room up. And the next turn Mousehold goes Follow Me again, and I go for knockoff again. I don't know why I didn't go for Rock Slide for the second time. I just wanted the Oranguru gone, I guess. But the Oranguru locks Houndstone into Howl with Encore, which I'm okay with. There are far worse moves to be locked into. Tyranitar takes out the Mousehold with the second knockoff, which might have been a lucky roll, since it was half power. But Tyranitar is now at +2, ready for what's in the back. I also forgot to mention this Oranguru is holding safety goggles since it's not taking Sandstorm damage. And here's like the third or fourth Urshifu of the video, I think. This time it's the single strike. I still Terrestrialise Tyranitar to resist whether fighting moves coming my way, and this is the first time we're seeing Tyranitar's Terror in this video, funnily enough. My opponent doubles down with Tyranitar with a Psychic move, kind of a smart play, probably expecting the Terror, or a switch at least. However, I just blow the Urshifu away with a +2 low kick. Thinking about it, we never got to see Houndstone or Goodra's Terror, but I guess some Pokemon don't even need to Terror. Houndstone was Dark Terror, by the way, just in case I couldn't use Ally Switch with Tyranitar, and to block Prankster as well. My opponent's last Pokemon is an Enamorus, which I don't think I'd seen in game at all before this point, but I did actually consider using one on this team instead of Weezing. If only there was a battle earlier on in the video that taught me what to expect from a Pokemon using Spread Fairy moves next to an Oranguru. Oh yeah, it's Drop. I consider running this Enamorus because it's got Overcoat, protected from Sandstorm. In a bit of an ironic twist, the only Pokemon on the field that would take Sandstorm damage here is Terraflying Tyranitar, but it faints before we could see that. Enamorus also has a natural ground immunity instead of Levitate. Plus it's slow enough to run in Trick Room, as we can see, so it would pair well with Rabsca too. I bring in Goodra and Weezing out on the field here facing down its potential replacement. Enamorus does Terrestrialise into the Fairy type for extra damage on Dazzling Gleam. I just protect with Weezing here since I expect them to not use Instruct this turn, and instead target it with a Psychic type move from Oranguru since Weezing resists Fairy type moves. While Goodra does take a bit of neutral damage, it's not strong enough for even the 2-shot Goodra, so I don't really know what EV spread this Enamorus will be using, but it's really not great damage. The Oranguru does indeed target Weezing, and Goodra gets Iron Head off on Enamorus, which is actually a 2-shot. Could have sworn Enamorus was a bit tankier than that. And since the Trick Room wore off, Goodra moves first and can take out the Enamorus with a second Iron Head. I guess Weezing was the correct choice after all, although there really wasn't a great display of Enamorus. The Oranguru does hit Weezing with a Psychic, which does do a hefty chunk, but it seems to be its only attacking move, so I suppose it doesn't have anything to hit Goodra at this point. I went for Sludge Wave with Weezing just in case Enamorus got hit with a low roll and lift, and maybe get a lucky poison on Oranguru, but to no avail. The next turn Oranguru targets into Goodra, I guess to test if it could actually take it down given enough time, but that turns out to be a fruitless endeavour, and it's only a matter of time before I take it out first, or get a lucky Iron Head clinch or something. Maybe I should have been a bit toxic and shown that I had life due. I'd be like, yeah, you're not winning this exchange. Anyway, good games to Huizo, and with that, I've officially reached Master Ball rank with this pretty unorthodox team. It's not a massive achievement, but it was the goal of the video, as well as hopefully being a decent showcase for some of these Pokemon. Maybe someone will see some potential, and we'll start seeing more Rabsca or Hisui and Goodra, who knows. And there we go, our rank number is pretty low, in the 15,000s, closer to 16,000, but it didn't matter to me at the time. I think I'll save climbing Master Ball rank for a different time with a different team in another video. If you enjoyed this slight variation in my usual content, let me know, leave a comment, like the video, and I'll see if I can continue this on a semi-regular basis. I already have at least one other ranked video in the works, so feel free to subscribe and keep an eye out for that sometime in the future. Until then, goodbye for now.